Welcome to the My Personal Football Coach Youth Soccer Player Development Podcast, episode 44 with Taff Rahman.
Welcome to MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Soccer Player Development Podcast. Discover all the secrets, hints and tips about soccer player development and soccer coaching from some of the leading figures in world soccer. Here's your host, Saul Isaacson-Hurst.
Hi guys, welcome back to another show. Before we go into this week's guest, just want to make a big announcement. Really happy to announce that we've finally finished the latest upgrade to the My Personal Football Coach app. So now really excited. Basically what happened is that players can now upload their own videos and and store their own training sessions. Also they can now add to a team library. So we've got the My Personal Football Coach team library, but really specifically, more importantly now with all our partner clubs, they'll have their own specific team library. So basically players from that club will be able to upload their own videos and then add to a team library, which is only accessible to the players, coaches and parents of that club, and they'll be able to like each other's efforts and videos and things like that. So really excited about this update. Been working on it for a while. Really think it's going to help boost engagement and peer review, and also support coaches as well to be able to see what players are doing. So this is really going to take our club partnership to the next level, and we've already got lots of more clubs signing up and coming aboard. Want to welcome the Techers Academy in Bahrain that's joined us. We're excited about having club now in that part of the world as well, and joining clubs from all around the world. So you're interested in the club partnership, how it can take your club to the next level. Remember, all players get access to the app. All coaches will get access to the Coaches Pass, the world's leading online resource for coaches, and also you can check in and log the data for all your players and the users in that. So give us a bell, give us a message, and we can set you up a free demo so you can have a look at it for your club. Also, just briefly, want to mention the Coaches Pass. Thanks for all you guys' feedback about the Coaches Pass. If you don't know, the Coaches Pass is an online resource for coaches. We are uploading new video sessions of coaches from all around the world every week. So every week in your inbox on the website, you're going to get a new video session of a coach, a pro coach from around the world, delivering a session to various different age groups. So really excited about that. The feedback's been great. I know you guys love it. It's a big difference, I think, from getting video sessions to actual, diagrams, which is still good, but it's nothing like seeing the coaches live and seeing how they interact with player and their communication and stuff like that. So big thanks for all that. Had some great feedback for the Coaches Pass recently. Don't forget also that, remember, we got a 7-day money-back guarantee, and not only the Coaches Pass but the app. So you can go online, you can try it. If you don't like it, no questions asked, money-back offer. So go to mypersonalfootballcoach.com to find out more. Now moving on to the show, really excited about this week's guest, Taff Rahman. Taff's someone I've known for many years. He's been on the circuit in terms of academy football. He's got a wealth of experience, unbelievable experience, this man. He's worked at the academy level at Arsenal, at Tottenham. He's also worked for the Football Association. He's also worked at international level as well, quite remarkably involved in the recent Guyana football success in their international qualification, working under Michael Johnson. Quite a stunning underdog story here, what they did there. So fantastic, with lots of knowledge to share. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy this one. It's very rare you find someone who with such complete experience at all levels of the game, from grassroots all the way up to the international level and the highest level. So without further ado, let's get into the show. So Taff Rahman, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So can you give us a little bit of a brief outline of your playing and coaching career up to this point?
Playing career was pretty much by default. I grew up in Camden in the inner city, just played street football and cage football, and by the off chance a friend of a friend asked me to come and play grassroots football at a club in Harrow, and that's where it all started pretty much. I wasn't aware how good I was, just because I was playing unconstructed football in a very simplistic environment with friends and everyone that lived on the estate. And from that kind of led on to getting trials, district level, county level, going to QPR, Luton, and a few other clubs before signing for Arsenal as an academy player. And that was when I was 11, going into end of year 7. which was a huge achievement when I look back at it. I used to live in Kentish Town, and Arsenal Stadium was literally a mile, if that. And on match days before joining up with the team, my grassroots team, that was us to see the fans going off, and I was like, wow, that's amazing. So getting to Arsenal was a huge achievement, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed my time playing through the different academies and age groups.
So how long were you at Arsenal for?
From then till 18. So I went through the first ever full-time coaching, playing, education program, which was pretty much getting picked up every morning, going to a partnership school that Arsenal had signed a contract with, and being one of 10 boys that was on the course, which was challenging.
How old what was that, like scholar year?
13. So 13, yeah. So getting up at 6 in the morning and going there, then travelling back like 6:30, 7 o'clock, 7:30, getting back home, and that consisted of doing schoolwork but at the same time playing football.
So that was the full-time academy?
Yeah, so it was a
full-time program.
Yeah, it was a full-time program, and
what school was that?
It was at Hymes Park in Chingford.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was one hell of a challenge, to be honest, both psychologically, socially, in terms of me getting out of my area, going into a new school, settling in. But at the same time, from a footballing perspective, it gave me a great opportunity to train every day, work on my development areas and so forth, and play with people like David Bentley, Ryan Gary, who's the Arsenal under-23 coaches now, and being in that model. And there was a lot of technical, small-sided games that we worked on, and yeah, it was a great experience.
So talk a little bit about then. We'll go through this a bit quickly, and then we'll come back in a bit detail. Yeah. Tell us a bit about then. You left Arsenal. What age did you leave Arsenal? 18.
Okay. So after that, I went on a number of different trials. It wasn't the easiest time for me because of personal circumstances with family and mum being ill and so forth. So I kind of had a mental setback at the same time, going through some injuries. Went on to trial at Rushden and Diamonds, Bristol City, went to play in America a little bit, Atlanta Silverbacks. Things didn't quite work out because of the situation with my mum and so forth. So I came back, played at Ebbsfleet, Hendon and Fisher Athletics. I had a recurring injury that I picked up during my scholarship years, where I kind of tore grade 3 hamstring, which had an ongoing issue, and then I ended up doing my ACL a couple of years later and doing it again. So that kind of derailed and demotivated me. So after leaving football around 24, went into coaching, coached that semi-pro team, which was interesting, running a men's team at 23, 24, and going on to university to do my sports science and coaching degree through the PFA. And after that, around 26, 27, went back to Arsenal, coached within the academy 4 or 5 years, working through the 9s to 14s, 15s, at the same time working as a sports scientist and strength and conditioning coach through the day, because what I was trying to build for myself was a real wide foundation of experience and knowledge, narrowing that to my coaching pathway. So at least I've got the understanding of how the different disciplines work. So yeah, after that period, had some time out, went around the world looking at different clubs, went to Brazil for the World Cup and had a look through Uruguay, Argentina, some of the street football in Brazil and professional clubs. On my return, I looked at coaching again and went into Spurs at that time, which was a great time at Spurs because Spurs has just built their new facility, and a philosophy that was very much player-centred, developing players that are 1v1 dominant, technically competent. So yeah, that journey lasted around 3-4 years before moving on to working at the FA and doing some work with the England national team through the mentee program with the 16s, 18s and 20s. And that was another experience that was unbelievable, to be honest, because I remember one game where we was playing 16s versus France, and I turned around and I was looking down the tunnel, and I was like, wow, Elijah's there, Ben Cottrell's there, Alfie Matthews is there, who else is there? There was one more person. I was like, wow, I remember them as babies, and now they're playing in the national team, and that was a huge fulfillment in many ways, halfway through a cycle. So seeing them go now another 5 years and see where they end up, that was a real memorable moment. And from that went on to took a chance to go and work in China for a bit, see something different, and at the same time doing coach education with the FA. And an opportunity came to go and work in Guyana. Most people say Ghana, and I'm like, no, it's Guyana, which is in South America. And they're like, wow, how did that come about? And then what made you take that opportunity?
Okay, so hold it there. We want to come back.
Yep.
All right, because this is we'll go into that in a bit more detail. So I don't want to ruin the ending. So just rewind a little bit.
Yep.
And talk about your first coaching role. What was your very first coaching job? Was it with the Pro Touch Academy and working in that environment?
I'd say, like, when I really look back
players?
at my journey, my first coaching role was probably when I was about 12, 13, because playing in the state, we never had a team. So it was like, get your mates together and we'd enter the local Regents Park League and the Camden Unity Cup, and I'll be managing it with our friends. So I never realised until like years later that, I was already picking a team, I was putting the team together. But then, working with Pro Touch was one of the opportunities. At the same time, running the Camden District team. Yeah. So both hand in hand.
Think about that, because obviously I grew up in similar sort of around the corner, and as very much a street player as well. Do you think being like a street player in that environment, does that affect the way you coach and the way you look at players and the way?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say so very much, because there's a lot of self-mastery involved when you're playing by yourself. There's a lot of problem solving and feed forward. So the information that you get from making mistakes or trying to beat a player, or you play against a wall, or you've got to defend yourself against a big player or take on a small player. It's all lots of different information, but there is no actual coach that's there to actually support you. So very much taking on the information yourself, and almost working out how to solve that, and I describe it as like there was coaching, but it was invisible. It was like an invisible architecture. It had a formula of something, but you couldn't pinpoint what it was and then how you was picking that up.
So how's that affected you as a coach and the way you work with, especially the younger age groups?
So freedom, letting them experiment, putting them into situations where it's problematic. It challenges them mentally, physically, psychologically, socially, but even to the point of building on leadership skills where they have to pick their own teams, or they have to manage a tournament, or they have to do something that's going to ultimately create positive conflict with their peers. So lots of freedom and lots of ownership, with guidance, a little bit of guidance and so forth. And I would say that's how I tend to come across as a coach and deliver my sessions is allowing freedom to be one of the forefronts of learning.
But because obviously we grew up in that environment, and we see that the phenomenal individuality, the creativity, and those outcomes that we all crave as coaches. And some people say it's impossible to replicate those in structured environments. We've got like players like Sancho, and he's come through, Hodgson and Doyle now have come through the academy system. What's your thoughts on how to foster that sort of street mentality in a structured environment? Because we have very little street football left these days.
Yeah. I think it's really taken a step back and looking at the players when they're at that younger, tender age in the foundation phases and the pre-academy, and looking at what they really enjoy and how they like to play, what's their personalities, and not stifling those personalities, but really giving them that boost that, go on, do that. If you like doing that, go and have a go at that, and really praising that rather than, well, try this and try that, and almost trying to manufacture someone before they're even have got their own self, style, identity, and so forth. And that might come later down the line when they're going into that youth or professional development phase. So within that professional environment, it's actually really looking at the players as individuals, what do they come with, and how do we harness what they are already, build on that, so they are who they want to be and how they see the game, and then adding on the building blocks that's going to actually give them a platform to continue on.
And where do you stand on this? There's almost this tendency these days to just let the game do the work, almost just getting players in a game and letting them get on with it. Are you very much in that, or are you a bit of a combination with structure as well?
A combination of the two, really. I think sometimes when you in a constructive environment, if you just let the game be the teacher, it kind of just becomes they're just playing, which still they are learning, but at the same time, when you've got so much talent embedded in one area, they might need some direction in terms of how to get to the next part. So there needs to be elements of coaching through very much a guided discovery kind of angle, and more of an encouragement to build on their self-expression, without stifling, over-coaching or taking out their personality. So in that way, yes, a collaboration of the two. I suppose that it's not, I don't agree with balance as such. It's not a balance, it's more of an awareness of skillful neglect on when certain players or groups of players need something that might be, okay, you can run with that. The others might need a bit more of, okay, you need a little bit of coaching here, or a little bit of support to get up and stay with the group. So yeah, it's more of an awareness of when and how to do the actual coaching and let the game be the teacher.
And so tell us a little bit about then when your first academy role at Arsenal, your first coaching job. What was that like in terms of a young coach going into that environment? Obviously, you know the environment, you've been a player there, but what was that like in terms of wearing a different hat?
It was very difficult, very, very difficult. And I suppose I'm more aware now and further down my journey, but when I look back at it, I was a novice. And back then I would have thought, yeah, I know football because I played football and so forth. But it was, I was still building my understanding of how to coach, and how to build the different building blocks of coaching. So in that way, it was almost like sometimes just circulating 360 and not knowing, okay, am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? But then at the same time, trusting the journey and doing it and asking people feedback and what they think about it and so forth. But the initial start was a little daunting, yeah.
Just about the practically, what was the philosophy like at Arsenal then at the time?
Very much technical based, with quick, fast decision making, being able to play and at the same time think and move in line with what's going on. The technical element was a big factor. The speed of thought was a huge element because Arsenal style is to play fast, quick combinations, 1v1s. Finish off the attack, so lots of it around intensity of practice was not necessarily physical intensity, but making the players think more quickly and more forward, at the same time being able to play and think to support in different ways moving forward, and then being able to finish off the play in different ways and so forth.
So give us a typical Arsenal session would look like then at the time.
Back then, and then more so probably now as well, in terms of lots of individual ball work, looking at breaking down the skills, the technical skills into skills. So lots of 1v1 opportunities, lots of opportunities that lead to goal scoring, and small practices where you're playing maybe possessional games end to end, and then building into more small-sided games that are challenging but yet competitive. So
a lot of, if I'm mistaken there, but a lot of mannequin work, as it's called, pass and moving drills, that sort of thing.
So initially lots of technical practices shaped around just refining the actual technique of certain passing or receiving or moving or turning and so forth. I suppose for me, I used to say repetition is the mother of all technique. If you can get that repetition with realism and realisticness, and you've got that embedded, taking it into a skill and really excelling on that, becomes beyond second nature, that you are onto the next part of your movement or whatever you need to do. So in that way, yeah, there was lots of technical work around mannequins, but also lots of individual work leading into doing it on a 1v1, 2v2, and building up through overloads and so forth.
And so what age groups did you predominantly work with when you were there?
So it started off with the 9s, 10s, worked with the 11s, 12s, and little bits with the 13s and 14s, and then moved across after that to Spurs.
Okay, so then talk about game day then. You know, I remember my first year in academy football, what fun that was. Tell us a bit about, an Arsenal-Tottenham game under 9s. That's a lot of fun.
I think, Arsenal-Tottenham game under 9s or first team, it's always a big build-up, irrelevant. But with the kids, much as you try to actually keep it, it's a development game and so forth. Kids know, and parents and everyone else, and things will be like history will always be brought forward and so forth. But at the end of the day, it was a game from a coaching perspective. But in terms of the aura and the energy of the game, it was a mini Arsenal versus Tottenham North London derby kind of thing. So there was a lot of excitement, and
how important was winning a game like that, or generally in the academy at Arsenal?
It wasn't necessarily about winning. It was about competing. It was about showing that you can stay up with the game, you can dominate. It was about embedding and living your philosophy, and as a byproduct winning. But don't get me wrong, having said that, and you want to stick to your philosophy and so forth, winning did creep into it because of what the story it carries. So there is no getting away from, I suppose, when you have these London derbies, even at academy levels, there's an element of, okay, we want to get one over, or we want to beat them, or we want to dominate them, and so forth.
Tell us a bit about what's the recruitment strategy at Arsenal? What sorts of players are they looking for there at the time?
Well, back then it was very much looking at technical players that can move biomechanically very well, irrelevant physically big or physically small, but you can see that they can move biomechanically very well by the long term, but have a physical structure for the game that will support the Arsenal philosophy of playing at a high intensity. In terms of skillfully looking at players that are fearless in terms of taking players on, and willing to go into 1v1 competitiveness and combativeness, both in an attacking principle but also in a defending principle, being able to win the ball and actually break out and go and play, and at the same time having a foundation that they have a way about them, and also developing them through playing in different positions. So lots of recruitment around the future individual being able to actually stay up with the game from a technical perspective, but also from a physical perspective as well.
And what were your main takeaways from your time at Arsenal as a coach?
It's an interesting question, because having been through there as a player and having been through there as a coach, there's lots around technique. Like, technique is one of the big foundations of it, but being able to use that technical skill in a very tight situation and dominating 1v1, creating overloads was critical. So you being able to beat your man or getting past them was ultimately a big advantage, because that overload created an unbalance to the opposition. So being able to do that very, very quickly, but also like coaching players and allowing them to self-express and be the player that they are, and support them to actually fulfil on their potential.
Interesting. So then let's talk about your next academy role at Tottenham. Tell us a little bit about that. First of all, how that come about, and then tell us a little bit about what was that like going into that environment?
Yeah, it was. I took some time out between that period, and wanted to learn more about myself as a person. So before taking that on, I went travelling a little bit around South America and looking at different ways of football. Went to different institutions, professional, from schools to Michael Johnson Performance Centre to Ajax to Barcelona, looking at all the different makeup of football from a different angle. And going to Tottenham at that time, you can see how the philosophy was really tight in terms of building the player. There was a great link between how a foundation player or even a community player would look like in terms of in a Spurs setup.
So what does that look like? Give us a little bit of a detail about
So I suppose the programme was spread right the way across in terms of like not just looking at academy players, but setting a programme that trickles all the way to the community, and the foundation works together with with the academy. Again, like looking at lots of individual technical ability, forward-facing skills, back-to-goal-facing skills, the ability to receive.
What's the main difference between that and Arsenal, the philosophies at the two clubs, practically?
I wouldn't say there was...
Maybe they had desired outcomes. What was practically different in terms of the delivery, maybe?
For me, I found Spurs was a lot more wider in terms of like looking at players and building players in different areas, but also having that link between the whole of the philosophy spreading out into the community and so forth.
What does that mean then, spreading out to the community? What do you mean by that?
So like the foundation would be working on the technical aspects of the game, and so if you saw, say, a foundation player come in, you can almost say, you know what, he's been on a Spurs kind of technical program, and that will seep into the academy, and when they do make that transition, it's actually a lot more easier, because they've inherited some of the DNA within them already, and it was more about refining that. But yeah, a lot more detail. The philosophy was again individualistic, looking at players, focusing on 1v1 domination, and really at the same time lots of wider base in terms of selecting players that are maybe undermaturated and waiting patiently for them, and putting programs in that helps them to stay up with the group, but not neglecting them within the group. So in that way, there was a lot more thought within that process, and yeah, it was a little bit more of a different kind of eye-opening for me, and that's something that I was looking for. And to be honest, I'm always looking for, because I think sometimes, like, just being in certain environments, you can start come with an open lens, but you start narrowing off. So
I found that from my perspective, working at two different clubs, Tottenham and Chelsea, really improved me, because I was very much tunnel visionist in Spurs, where doing things is really, unique, and then Chelsea a completely different way, and it developed me as a coach and made me, like you say, open your eyes up to different ways of, not one way to, make that.
No, absolutely, and I think that sometimes as a coach, personally need to create that. So when I'm mentoring other coaches, I suggest things like that. But for me personally, it helped me to really get a wider lens on how to do things in a different way, and that ultimately opened up another new space. I'm like, okay, so if that's that and that's that, how does something else fit in, or how do I see this grey area in between the two? So ultimately, just open up bigger perspectives, and more perspectives I was getting, and I'm getting more. I'm seeing players in different lights, philosophies in different ways, environments in different ways, and there is no actual perfect formula for any of this, and that's where I've come to the notion that there is no balance as such. It's more about awareness, and being able to skillfully spot what's needed for a certain player or a certain coach or a certain environment, and how do you bring that invisible architecture together that you can see that someone else might not be able to see directly straight away, until you explain how you're linking things up to take player maybe from under 12s to pick up some of the characteristics and some of the profiling and some of the positional play and some of the skills to actually get to the 16s in a certain pathway. So yeah, perspective is a huge part for me personally, and I'm ever so grateful to be able to get into different environments to actually learn that.
So what age groups did you work with when you were at Tottenham?
So youth development phase, foundation phase, and floating right the way across at times. Something that I really enjoyed as well, because I was able to see how the link was from top to bottom, and that's when I talk about that half cycle, almost seeing a player from under 9s going up to 14s, 15s, and similar to Arsenal, seeing that similar half cycle. But now I'm seeing that full cycle, and what the players have gone through at under 9s to where they are now, And it's been interesting, like both from a Spurs perspective, but from an Arsenal perspective as well. Some of the players that I saw at under 6-7s coming into that pre-academy, but when they came into the academy at under 9s, some of the character traits, and he was like, okay, you know what, that's quite interesting that he's got that character trait. That's a real big thread that others have had to get to the under 18s. And seeing some of the players play under 23s now, I'm like, yeah, it's quite interesting. Like that thread is still there.
So give us some examples of those sorts of character threads you're talking about and those players.
Just those. It's not necessarily self-mastery is a big part of it that I have really seen that players come in show at an early stage that has continued on. So the players that actually came in and almost done a lot more of deliberate practice. So whether it's passing the ball against the wall, whether it was just keeping the ball up, whether it was just playing with whoever turned up early. At the same time, the way they approach training, if there was a sense of awe of I'm focused, I'm ready for this. And even at like 11, 12, some of them you can see that, okay, I'm coming here, I want to be better than I was, and I want to get better the next session. So I suppose that kind of psychological side, more than anything else, it was focus, it was deliberate practice, self-mastery, and with that, yes, it trickles into resilience because I'm here a little bit early, I'm practicing a little bit more, and showing commitment. So a lot of those psychological traits is the biggest thread that I found.
And what about generally? I mean, so now you've gone into another environment, you're a little bit more experienced, you come from another club. What was that like for you personally, being in that environment? How do you assert yourself, if you like? Are you a little bit more confident? You're in any different philosophy? I mean, talk about that dynamic.
Interesting that. So I was actually reflecting back on a lot of those changes because I've transitioned through different areas, and that for me was. So yeah, so that experience was very interesting for me and very insightful as a person, learning to adapt and go into a new environment, get to know new coaches, understand new coaches from their perspective and so forth. And it took me time to mention the word assert. It's ultimately working out how does it operate here and what are the different building blocks and so forth. So it took me a little bit of time, but one of the things that I found that was really helpful was just spending lots of time individually with coaches and asking the question and finding out, okay, this works like this, what's your rationale and what's your thinking behind it. And coaches were amazing at that because coaches love to share and at the same time find that about from your perspective. So in that way it really helped me to settle in and learn and understand the philosophy a lot quicker, but also acclimatise to the change of environment, both similar to when players go out on loan, I suppose, or move clubs. So yeah, that was not just coach development, that was me as a person developing to work in different environments.
What advice would you give to a young coach who's maybe just breaking into academy football, wants to break into academy football, in terms of, how can you go in there if you want to make a career in the game, and make a positive impact?
Big thing is build relationships, and it's not relationships as in like someone you just know them or anything like that, but it's more about having those conversations to find out whatever your end goal is how can you get support or get some mentoring. So that's ultimately speaking with coaches from your club, but maybe from other clubs as well, and seeing how they saw the game or how they saw training. On a match day, maybe I've connected with other coaches from other clubs and said, let's grab a coffee because I'd love to hear what your thoughts were on this part of the game, and being able to get it from a different perspective. But at the same time, what I was getting was how they implemented certain ideas or strategies and so forth. So that gave me a great understanding when I look back at the game or the play. Those are the big things for me in terms of getting to know other coaches and building those relationships where you can find out more. At the same time, I would say getting yourself into different environments, not necessarily just in football, but going into environments where people are at the same time managing or coaching people. So that could be in in a corporate environment, or it could be in a school environment, or it could be in a college environment. What are the strategies that those people are using in order to help their staff team to develop, or the pupils to develop, or the dancer to become even better at dancing? And some of my experience has been going into schools, going into even like an arts class for the blinds, and being able to explain the detail of what the object was, so the other people that couldn't see can draw it. And the communication with the artist was just phenomenal. It was like, do I give that much detail when I coach, or do I just skim over things? Because really and truly, sometimes the kids are blind to what you're actually trying to coach. So am I really using the detail of size, of adjectives, of how it feels, what it looks like, how far you are, what angle, how the light is shining, what can you see from different positions? So going into that kind of detail, going into that kind of environment to pull out that kind of detail. Been fortunate to go into, like, really over the last 3-4 years into high pressured corporate environments where people are having to make £1 million decisions, or £100 million, or the country's stake. So things like Barclays Bank or law firms where they're signing on contracts. But how do they negotiate that? How do they actually come to this consensus of, we're going to do this, but then looking at the process, what do they take to actually get to that decision? So depending on where you are in your journey and what you're trying to find out, over the last couple of years, having worked more with older players and around senior side of the game, I found myself, okay, it's about managing people. It's about how do you build that relationship with people, and how do you go through the processes of getting people to buy in. So yeah, younger coaches, older coaches, depending on where you are, you need to get yourself into different environments away from football, because sometimes football can blind you on almost institutionalised in learning things in a certain way, where the game is made up of people of different colours, different backgrounds, different environments, different cultures. And football is very much a migrating game now, so you're working with players from different countries, coaches from different countries, fans from. You as a coach might be, all of a sudden, 10 years ago you wouldn't be going to as many tournaments in Europe or South America or Far East. Now you are. So how do things work in different cultures? So really branching yourself out. You might not be able to go all the way to Southeast Asia, but you might be able to meet someone who is from Southeast Asia, or someone from Lithuania or Uruguay, or wherever in the world. So it's really understanding that football is moving fast.
So then let's talk about your next role with the FA.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about how that came about and what exactly you were doing.
So I took on so the FA had a menteeship role where allowing coaches to come in and work across the different departments within the FA. And that was very much a developmental role, which I thought would give me more of a 360 understanding, really not narrowing anymore, but having even more of a wider perspective. So I got to work across the coach education department, so the CCDs, county FAs, to PE department, we go into schools, to YCDs who work with youth coaches within clubs, NCDs who work with people that are going through their A license and that support mechanism, and the national teams also. And that was a real eye-opener, because how the national team works is different to how CCDs work or how the PE department works, but you can see a thread of values that need to be carried when you're working for the FA, and then how to go about doing that. And that value really keeps people aligned, or keeps people aware of what the message is for the short term, medium term and the long term. So working with national teams, I was able to do the under 16s camp, as I mentioned previously. Seeing those players in the tunnel was something else. But
so what was that like in terms of delivering sessions for those sorts of boys, that quality of?
It was more so. It was nothing more than similar to what you do in the academy clubs, really, at 16s. There are lots of work around bringing the players together, because they're not together all the time. So really embedding some of the social stuff, so activities, getting them in terms of physically prepped. So there was a lot of performance analysis of the players. Where are they in terms of their physical fitness, tiredness, injuries and so forth, and reporting that back with clubs. In terms of training, lots of technical work, lots of small-sided game, but also embedding that England DNA into the players and connecting them.
So tell us about the England DNA then. What are your...
So in terms of England DNA, so how we play out from the back to building the attack, to finishing the attack, then looking at more in detail going into the players, so staying on the ball and being able to create opportunities or stay on the ball to draw players in so you can play around, how to go about finish off the attack. So very much the small puzzles within that big jigsaw, and trying to get the players to connect more into that.
So I mentioned that. So in terms of like your delivery and your planning sessions, I mean, how did that work in terms of, was there a curriculum? Was there, how do you know what you're going to work on? How did practice design come about?
So in terms of that will be a lot of the coaches sitting around the table prior to the boys coming into camp, and design. So it's first of all knowing who's coming in, who's available. Start talking about where are they in terms of, as I mentioned, physically, and will they be playing and so forth. And then looking at designing the training programs for the whole week, and including like a couple of days before the match, what's the intensity, what's the session going to look like, both from a technical, tactical, social perspective. And then one day before the game, how are we going to bring that down? And then the day of the game in terms of the match plan. So there will be presentations, and there were presentations throughout. So this is what we're going to work on today. These are the areas that we're going to cover. So in terms of showing that on the projector, showing both in terms of icons, so like session plans, but then taking that into match practice in the sense of videos from past games, or maybe.
So how do it work? They say, right, Taff, today I want you to take the defence or something, or I want you to do a possession session with everything. I mean, how did you fit into that?
So very much I worked with the coaches, so supporting it. So in terms of my role, it was more so, this is what we're going to work on. Can you take part in this in terms of maybe doing the playthrough or something like that? But mainly more so is firstly getting that plan in place, and being able to show that on to the players that this is what we're working on. So it's seamless. And these are the learning objectives that we're going to do. So when we do go on the pitch and when we're going through that session, we're meeting those objectives, and then bringing them back into the classroom or back into the auditorium, going over that. So what did you think? What did we cover? Did we hit on those points? How is this going to work in the game? Could we have improved on something, or can you see something that we could have done differently? So really trying to get that whole thread from before they come into the camp, planned everything, shaping the sessions, linking that to the practices, and then reviewing the practices. So lot of plan to review within the whole camps, and lots of plan to review.
And then let's move on, because I want to talk about, get our teeth in this, your Guyana, your experience there. So tell us, how did that come about? That
so Guyana came about through just I suppose lots of connection with going to different events and keeping in touch with lots of coaches and so forth, and it was out of the blue. Michael Johnson got the position, and Michael was like, do you fancy coming over?
So how did you know Michael?
So just from the circuit, as I mentioned previously, like in terms of connecting with other coaches and then sharing what your values, your philosophy and so forth, and then building that relationship. So through the LMA events, but through various different games and bumping into different events. So ultimately it was probably about 5 years prior to actually getting that kind of opportunity. So maintaining my development, but also seeing Michael's development and keeping aligned. So that's how it really came about. It was just one of those phone calls, and I was quite thinking about it when he mentioned Guy, and I was like, well, let me do some research. And then I was thinking about South America. Football is not the primary sport.
It's not the primary sport.
No,
what's the primary sport?
Cricket is what they're very much famous for, cricket. And then Michael was like, okay, this is getting a team together. We're going to have a meeting. So we met up with a team in the Midlands, and it was all go very, very, very quickly. So within 4 or 5 days, we was out to Brazil, working with the young. We had a camp over in Brazil, working with a young guy, and he's 18 to 23s, and I was really taken back by the passion of the players, and the willingness to learn. It almost made me realise how I think sometimes when you have things on your doorstep, you don't really appreciate it, and seeing them where they had lack of facilities, equipment, access to coaching and then so forth, the players were just absorbing everything, coming back. Can we do an extra session? Can we talk about this? How does this work? Oh, coach, can you draw me that practice again so I can remember it, so I can go and use it in my grassroots club, because some of them were still coaching as well and working in schools. And it was a real magnet of realising, wow, I didn't know I was making that much impact, like literally just, this is something that I would have thought was basic over here, but over there it was like gold dust.
So where were most of the players from Guyana in terms of their?
So pretty much started off.
I mean, they're based in Guyana rather than.
Yeah. So Guyana, some playing in Trinidad and Tobago, some playing in the US, some playing in the UK, and also Finland and Portugal. When we started the squad, August 2018, March 23rd, 2019. Is when we qualified for the Gold Cup. The squad changed close to, I would say, about 90%.
Right.
So a strong emphasis on recruitment.
So tell us a bit about that recruitment. I mean, how does that work? How do you go and say, right, let's go and find some players when you're a small country in the Caribbean or that part of the world?
And that was a big team effort. And Asa, the analyst, and Michael and the rest of the team, they were immense at starting to network. So we kind of talked about, okay, let's look at the Guyanese community, let's look at census data. Where do the Guyanese community live? So looking at the data, you had the UK, you had America, you had Canada, you had Holland from their connection to French, to Suriname, which is the country next door, and then really getting the message out there that Guyana has this opportunity to build something, and we're looking for players. So it was through social media, it was through.
So famously, I mean, Sam Cox was playing for you, the old Spurs boys, in academy coach there. How did you recruit Sam? How did that come about?
Sam was already playing within the system.
Okay.
Sam had been very committed to playing for the team for some time, but there was lots of other players that were not quite involved in the team for whatever reason. But it was trying to get those players in. Some playing in League One, some playing in Conference, some playing in MLS. So it was a matter of bringing everyone together and showing them that if we bring all the players together as a collective, there will be a complete paradigm shift on the quality of the team and what we can achieve. So through those conversations with individual players, to group meetings, to meeting up at 9 o'clock in London for a meal for all the Guyanese players that are in South, to meeting up some of them in the North, to telephone conversations, and Asa, who's the analyst working at Norwich now, doing loads of internet research. Okay, there's a player here, there's a player there. So internet research became a huge thing. At the same time, building an app on how do you find Guyanese community in terms of the players that are playing and seeing that they're eligible. So that's something that we started looking at and discussing and building on. So while it was about coaching and you want to coach the players in the team, you've got to find the players first when you're working in an environment like that. So we had players that in Guyana that lived in region that some don't have access on roads. And some don't have access to telephones and so forth. You'd have to go into the rural parts to actually get that message across. Look, we're playing, get involved, and so forth. So yeah, huge strategy both on the ground physically, telephone calls, WhatsApp groups, LinkedIn, internet, using WeScout, all of these different mediums to recruit the players and to bring them together.
So let's think about then. I mean, so you worked in academy football, you worked at the FA, and it's just interesting. You work as a national team role. What was that like then? I mean, day to day. I mean, how much time you actually involved? I mean, was it like a part-time role? Was it a full-time role? I mean, what was that work in practice? How did that work?
So with Guyana, it was more on going over there back and forward. So it wasn't a full-time role, and primarily because there was a lot of the players were based in the UK. So watching players both over here. In terms of timing, due to the geographical nature of being Guyana in South America, and you having to travel 15 hours, 20 hours, connecting flights, maybe to 2 different countries before you even land in Guyana, because there's no direct flights. So when you've got a week in September to prepare for one game, players are travelling. Some have played Saturday, a full 90 minutes, travelling over on the Sunday. They get to Guyana on the Monday. Coaches are the same because they've got their individual jobs as well. So Monday it's physical prep, seeing where they are, their wellness and so forth. You've got a session on Tuesday, and depending on what's happening in terms of the game time, it might be on the Thursday or the Friday. I can't remember what day it was. It was almost like 2 days, and then we're playing. Due to the way CONCACAF fixtures or the opposition nation can make it because of where they are. So time was a premium, and how do you fit in? How are you going to play? How are you going to attack? How are you going to defend? How are you going to manage the players? How are you going to get them mentally ready, physically ready? Took a lot, and in terms of the team that we had to work very diligently. So Asa doing the analysis, having everything ready, so it's ready to go. Mike, who was the head of people and culture, at the same time, even though those players were from Guyanese background, living in the UK, it was a lot about culture. Like, how do you bring people together that haven't been to Guyana maybe for some years, and Guyanese players being in Guyana, but then all of a sudden you're seeing these other players coming in and taking a position. So trying to buy them into one dream.
And what was it like? I mean, in terms of like you've predominantly been working with younger players, academy players. Now you're working with grown men, and also it's competition time. It's a lot different. Tell us a bit about what was that like in practice. I mean, in terms of how you're relating to players, how you're motivating them. What was the difference between that and working with young academy players?
More so because we was at the performance end. It was really, how are we going to go about getting those results? So there was an opportunity to go and build on technique and so forth. It was, okay, so-and-so is good at this, so-and-so is good at that. That's their super skill, that's their strengths, that's their weakness. How do we utilise that? So it was working with the players and managing them and really just completely treating them as adults and saying, look, this is what the game plan is, this is what we need to do. We need this from you. This is the ABC that needs to happen. And these are the 3 things that you need to do when we don't have the ball. And designing practice around that, rather than trying to develop the players. There was no time to do that. So really boasting the players to what their strengths were.
And what did that look like in terms of your week? So like Michael, you work with, might say, right, let's work on this. So you'd go and design and do the session, or how actively was he involved in the delivery? What did that look like in practice?
Yeah, so in terms of that, again, we'd look to plan, but because of international football, players that you had in mind might even not get released from their clubs, or they might come injured, or they come having played 90 minutes. So planning was very, very difficult in terms of trying to have something ready in terms of practices of the sessions. So Paul Williams, who's at Norwich at the moment, fantastic. We would do what in possession, I would do out possession, the next camp we might swap over. But in terms of really getting down to the nitty-gritty, we'll sit around and we'll say, look, this is the game plan. Are we going to press, or are we going to go for a mid-block, or are we going to defend deep? How does that look like now? Okay, what are the triggers from our front players? So, okay, this could be our front player, or it might even be him, right, or he still hasn't arrived. So who are we going with? So it was a lot of plan A, plan B, plan C, depending on what player was available, and having those ready conversations in place. Okay, if we need to go with him, this is what needs to happen, because he's not more of a intensive, aggressive presser. He's more of a guide, or is more of a stick and set, or Emre's more of a player that can get on the ball, running behind, take players on. So lots of adaptiveness, being adaptive within that environment, and that really was well connected by Mike Jones, who headed up people and culture. He was so good at diffusing some of the things that were happening, like in terms of how to bring in people that were late, or players that haven't been selected, or disagreements on like travel times because we're using external services or things like that. Just really dealing with it is what it is, how do we make the best of it? So having specialists right the way across, from the analysis to Mark, who's a professor at Derby, who was on the performance, to Mike Jones, who was people and culture, Michael Johnson heading it all up, Paul doing the coaching, myself doing the coaching, Asa doing the analysis, and then Ade from QPR doing the goalkeeping. So it was really having lots of different skill sets, but being able to work adaptively to a plan that was going to change at any point, at any time, both from a perspective of what we was going to deliver, or not even having a training pitch, or thinking that we're going to have 40 minutes and all of a sudden it's 40 degrees heat. So yeah, what it looked like was not your perfect plan. What it looked like was, we are in a situation, how do we make the best of it? And how do we make the best of it without it interfering with the players, interfering with the energy of the group, and being able to get that outcome, that result that we're really looking for. So it wasn't the perfect remedy. And again, like, we all developed from it because we always had to be on our toes and just be adaptive, be okay with, okay, that's not working, so next best thing.
So it's just part and parcel of coaching, isn't it? Flexibility. Unless you're in the, working at the very highest, Man City, where everything's completely to the time. You're going to have to be flexible. I just want to move on quickly because we're going to get a bit of time. Just tell us a bit about game time. What's that like? I mean, you played academy football, you've been at 9s, you played with the 16, but suddenly, it's all on the line. It's a performance level. What was that like? And then in terms of what was your role within that on the bench and contributing to that environment?
Yeah, it's interesting because if we look at each game, they were all nerve-wracking, because not nerve-wracking in the sense that was the energy in the stadium or from the people, because for Guyana it was going for something big. But throughout, we maintained a level of calmness because we had a plan, and we believed in our plan and what we was able to do. And also the players were outstanding. They were amazing at taking it on. So throughout, we maintained calm at the initial stages. First game, second game, we was getting results, and performances were good. But when you talk about game time, the biggest game was that last game. And that game time was something that I've never felt before. Having played as an academy player.
So who's the last game fixture against?
The last game was against Belize, and it was just like, you can feel the tension, you can feel before even the game, the country, this is what they're looking for. You're seeing people walk through like fields from different directions into the stadium. You can feel the Guyana is a vibrant country, music, people, culture, food. It was just like a summer Notting Hill carnival, and that was the energy. 6 hours, 8 hours before the game, you can feel it ramping up, and during the game, it was just the tension was just too much. It was. The whistles, you can feel people just checking their time. We score, they score. The nerves was building up even more. Players in the bench getting like agitated towards the last 10 minutes because they know what we're on for. And I'm sitting next to Michael, and you've got the FIFA camera in Michael's face, and they're coming in, they're going, they're coming in, they're going, because for FIFA it was one of the stories as well. This country has never been anywhere. They were just coming to pick up the story, but then this was something else. And at the end, like Michael, myself, Paul, everyone, we were just like, okay, let's just get over. I'm looking at the time's not moving on my watch. Last 2 minutes, they still got another chance, and it's like your typical game. You know, you're trying to see it out, but they can score at any point.
So what's it like? Are you trying to get information across at this time? Is it like just a cauldron of insanity in terms of anxiety and the nerves?
For me, I was maintaining calm, because I could see us seeing it out, and I can see that Michael's can see that it's happening. They were going direct. I reckon in the last 3-4 minutes they must have launched the ball at least 8 to 10 times. Diagonal balls just into the box. And Terence Van Kooten, I was like, this kid is just wiping them clean. So he was playing centre back for us. Bam, knocks it back. They put it again. Bam, knocks it back. And every time he's coming through, and I'm like, look, you just got to keep on doing that. There's only 30 seconds left. And literally when that happens, when the whistle went, you can feel the heartbeat getting even more stronger, because you know you've just done it.
So tell everyone what was the achievement. People might not know they've been living in a cave somewhere.
Guyana's never been to a major tournament in their history.
Yeah.
And this was the first time making it to the Gold Cup, which is like one of the smaller European nations getting to the Euros.
Yeah.
And when I rewind it back, when we was in Brazil, when we first started the first camp, being in the Brazil Museum triggered inspiration, hope. From having nothing, Brazil was able to achieve what they achieved. And the socio-economic status of Guyana is similar to what Brazil was 50 years ago, and so forth. And we said this saying, make history, don't just pass through it. And that's the slogan that we worked through right the way through each camp, conversations, make history. And so when that whistle went, we knew we made history. Everyone knew we made history. Even the cricket fans that didn't want to come knew we made history. So in terms of that energy, everyone just running onto the pitch, players gave it everything, lying on the floor, saw Sam Cox crying, this person, people jumping up and down, people praying, the flag was flying, drones taking pictures. And I couldn't find anyone. I'm like, Michael, where are you? Like, Ade, where are you? Like, everyone was just celebrating. We had people coming from America, from Europe to come and watch the game. So yeah, it was unreal. It's something that's going to stay with me for eternity. And I remember we was doing like closing talks and like in terms of like small discussions, and like people can take away a lot of things from you, but no one can ever take away your experience. Irrelevant what you do, no one can ever take away your experience. And that experience is something that created amazing feelings and fulfillment for me, but at the same time for the players, coaches, past players. So we finished on like, when you make history, you change the perception of the future. Guyana can always hope. Guyanese players can always hope. Guyanese female team is hoping, and they're doing well. Guyanese coaches are hoping. So all in all, just making history has changed the whole perception of the future for the players and for us all, because being able to do it in an environment like that with limited resources, so many moving parts, so much adaptiveness, and being able to keep going, makes me even realise. And that's where I got to, it's the invisible architecture that governs success.
Yeah.
It's not having the greatest facility. It's not being able to have a coach there every day. No, it's you wanting to do it. So it's got to come from that whole passion and the psychology side of it, and bringing people together for a bigger meaning.
So now, so it's quite inspirational, isn't it? It's got an amazing story. But I mean, so now post that, the dream team, coaching team's broken up. You've all gone your separate ways. I mean, for several reasons, I imagine. But just want to talk about, because obviously Michael Johnson now is working at the FA. He's talked about the problem with black and ethnic minority coaches getting into the game. Maybe there's like a wall here, or maybe there's discrimination, whatever. You're like a young man from Bengali descent, is that right?
Yeah.
Have you ever encountered that? What's your thoughts on that in terms of institutionalised racism or setbacks for coaches from ethnic minority backgrounds?
Yeah, there's a lot of positive work being done. So in terms of the FA moving things forward with the mentorship program, I think recent times you'll see in the media what's happening in terms of racism and so forth. It's a lot to do with culture. It's a lot of social unconscious biasness towards certain people, certain backgrounds, and so forth. And really, it's building that awareness, and what the evidence or what the reports are showing, that there is ongoing issues within the game, and the stakeholders are really taking more of an upfront approach to tackle those issues. But again, for me, it's a lot to do with education, and sometimes education has to be by design. Sometimes it's almost by default, and what I mean by that is, yes, you can put seminars on, like, have you thought about what's your blind spots? Are you aware of how certain things you might say might be offensive to someone else, and you're educating people. But other times it's by default. Football is a migrating game now. You're going to cross paths, not even football. The world is a migrating place. The way people are moving from one country to another, you're getting more interracial relationships. You go to a school in London, you're going to get however many different cultures. So that's not by design. People are going to cross paths. So
what do you think as well? I mean, it's interesting because why do you think there hasn't been more players from the South Asian community, particularly playing at the highest level? Do you think that's a unconscious bias with that in terms of maybe recruitment and selection?
Yeah.
Did you ever have that experience as you going as a young player?
From my experience of that, it's seeing is believing in many big ways. When you're looking around and you can't quite relate to someone, you can't see that you can be there, you almost feel like you don't belong. If you take, for example, Roger Bannister, no one ever thought that you could break the 4-minute mile, or was it the 5-minute mile? But the week that he broke it, 20 other people went and done it, or something like that. So again, for Asian players, there isn't as many role models to look up to believe that it's possible. And as I was saying about Guyana, by making history, you change the perception of the future. So by having representation or having people that people can look up to, ultimately gives them that extra little bit of belief that it's possible, that they can get some advice or they can get some openings. Huge strides made from within the black community, within the professional football, from we look at the 80s to where it is now. You've got coaches, you've got players, you've got directors, you've got people working right there across. When we look at the Asian community, there's not enough players at the top level. There's not enough coaches. There is players playing grassroots football, but there isn't enough role models and so forth. So in that way, it still has a long way to go. And there is lots of social biasnesses that exist. I have social biasnesses. Everyone has biasnesses, but it's about building that awareness. What is our biasnesses to ultimately open up those pathways. So it's going to be an ongoing thing that we need to continue to build education around, continue to share what's good and what's going to be beneficial for the whole game as a collective group, and that's what I'm doing with my part, like in terms of just going into different environments, going into different cultures and backgrounds and areas, and speaking to people and sharing some of the journey and experiences that I've had to inspire and give hope to the next generation. for me, it's the sun shines top down. If you haven't got people with an open mind, you haven't got people that are looking for a wider scope of experience or players and from different areas, you're not going to nourish the ones at the bottom, and it's just going to be purely just focusing on one area. So change really needs to happen at the top for it to spiral to the bottom.
And then what's next for you? You got like I got a bit of CV envy. You know, looking at your CV when I did the other day. You know, you've worked literally at every level of the game. What's next for you? What's your aspirations in the game? What have you got left to do?
There's so many things to do. There's definitely lots of untold, unfinished areas of development and things that I want to work on. For me, it's going back into coaching on the grass, but at the same time, having done the Guyana role and having worked in China, having worked in national teams and being around different environments, long-term ambition is to work your way to the top and work at the elite level within Europe or the rest of the world. But in order to do that, I want to pick up more skill sets, more experiences, working in different environments with forward-thinking coaches, and continue to develop. But mainly to get back on the grass and coach more and more. Yeah.
Taff, thank you very much, mate.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the MyPersonalFootballCoach.com Soccer Player Development Podcast. MyPersonalFootballCoach.com's Dynamic Ball Mastery Program is the world's leading online individual technical training program, proven and developed at the highest level in the English Premier League. Sign up now to train like the pros and take your game to the next level. Master the ball, master the game.